I know this is a fairly compressed session. We can't do everything from top to bottom about grading, but I'd just like to try to hit some highlights here. Grading is work. You're being paid for this, I hope. Right? You're not just volunteering for this. So I'd like to eventually get to some comments about what makes good for good grading and how to do it effectively. If we have time, we're going to do a couple scenarios. But to start off with, I think it's important to have us all understand, why do we even bother to grade? Who cares? Why do we grade?
So people can get feedback on how to improve themselves.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat. So feedback. So I'm going to start right on the board, write down some categories of why we grade. So I think the first one that most people think about is feedback. But now my question is, feedback to whom?
To both the students regarding how well they understand what's being taught, and the professors for how well they're teaching it.
Okay, so it's feedback to the students, so the students understand their progress in the course. To the professors, so the professors know how well she or he is teaching the material, how well the students are following along, how well the students are making progress. So students, faculty, are primary importance for the feedback. Who else is interested in that sort of feedback? Sir?
Employers.
Employers, potential employers, right? Which employer is not going to ask to see your resume and your transcript and your GPA, right? So your grading is possibly affecting the career path of all the students in the classes that you're TAing for. So employers. Others who are interested in that feedback? The university, right? So that's in a number of different forms. So if I'm teaching this fall, I'm teaching a junior level course in engineering. Some of you have had this or are in it now. And if I discover that when I start to ask my students to do simple integrals, that they have no clue what I'm talking about, I'm going to have to go back to the math department and say, what's going on? Why didn't you teach this properly? Or I need to have my students prepared in this fashion before they enter my class. So this is back and forth amongst the university. Okay, that sort of feedback. Scholarships, exactly. So there are external agencies that award scholarships, financial aid. The university does as well. Merit scholarships, there's certain criteria that students have to maintain to keep receiving those, and the same with external scholarships. Who else cares about grades? Parents, ah. Yeah, mine certainly did. Employers, right? Potential employers, and maybe we can broaden that. Potential graduate schools, med school, law school. They're all going to look at the transcripts.
Provides feedback for you, for what you need to cover more.
The faculty member, yes, that's right, for sure. Right? So there's all kind of constituencies out there that would use the grades that you are generating. Okay, so again, it's the communication that's going on. So feedback is one primary category of why we grade. Can anyone think of a completely different category?
It's a quantitative evaluation
For which purpose?
for the students' mastery and knowledge of the subject.
Right. So it is quantitative, and maybe I can fold that into the feedback. So it's feedback on the student's progress that the university records, for sure. Yeah, I'm thinking of a completely outside of that.
But differentiate students' performance from each other.
Who cares about that? Yeah, I think the same feedback people. We had a long list of employers and grad schools and all that. They're interested in who's the best student or who's in the middle of the class. But there's other completely different.
I mean, it's still feedback.
What's that?
If you're doing educational research and enforcing, I know they do it in the physics department where they come up with ways they can help improve students' retention of the material. And every once in a while they'll introduce it to a bunch of different classes and want to see the grades.
I'm going to put that down as a different category. So that's for administrative purposes. Let me talk more about that. So administrative purposes, so the university would like to know what's working and what's not. When we teach a class in this type of classroom as opposed to a traditional one, this active learning classroom, is the university doing better with that? We do research on ourselves. We are a research-oriented university. We should be trying to understand and research how our educational programs are proceeding. So that's administrative purposes. You mentioned the physics department, but it's broader than that. It's other departments as well. I work in the provost office, and the provost office is interested in that as well. Okay?
And motivation?
Motivation is another brand new category. Positive or negative motivation?
It could be both.
Either, both, right? If you get a good grade, you're happy about that. It motivates you to continue to do work. Okay, but if you get a bad grade, most people, I think, it says, "Oh, I better put more effort in. I should do something better." So both positive and negative motivation. Okay, any other reasons, thoughts here? I'm going to say one more about the administrative category, which most students don't realize. The university is subject to a variety of constraints from external organizations. Okay? So who gives us the authority to give you a diploma that says you've earned a bachelor's degree?
ABET.
So ABET. Okay? So that's for engineering. There are accrediting bodies that periodically come to campus to visit, to see that we are operating our educational programs at the appropriate level to be able to officially award you a degree that has some meaning. We just can't give away credits for nothing. And these external organizations periodically make visits to campus. You mentioned ABET. For those of you who are from engineering, ABET is an acronym for Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology. ABET comes to campus once every 6 years. Turns out that once in every 6 years is about a month from now. It's the first week of October. They haven't been here for 6 years. When they come here, they are going to be inspecting graded exams and graded homeworks and graded lab reports. They're going to look to see that we, as a university, are providing the right sort of feedback to the students on how they are learning. They are going to be looking to see, are our students making appropriate progress, so they can give us the stamp of approval. That gives us the authority to offer you a degree, a diploma, a degree that has meaning, that the external world, the employers, the grad schools, the professional schools would recognize as a valid credential. Okay? ABET is for engineering. Again, they're coming October 7th, I think. The university has another accrediting body called the Higher Learning Commission, which comes every 10 years. They were here in 2015. Every year we have to send them a report to prove that we still are in compliance. Okay, and this applies to the programs from the College of Arts and Sciences and Weatherhead and all the other schools. The School of Nursing has its own accrediting body that's parallel to ABET. Okay, so we have all this out there. The state of Ohio is another step. So there's some organization called the Ohio Department of Higher Education, and every time we make a change to our academic program, we offer a new degree, we make a change. Even if we just change the name of our program slightly, we have to send documentation down to Columbus through the computer, but it winds up being reviewed down in Columbus, and they make a decision on whether what we've done is valid, whether we still have the authority to stay open as a university in the state of Ohio, that your degrees that you're working for are meaningful, that they're valid. Okay? So as you grade, you are contributing to that administrative process of keeping the university open and operating and functioning as a higher learning institute. Okay? So there's real purpose and need for that. Okay, any questions on any of that? I think these are the three main categories. Try to help students work better, lots of administrative purposes of the research part, keeping legal, okay, and essentially feedback to and from the student and the faculty. And one name that we didn't mention on there is it's also feedback to advisors. If I'm advising students and I see they are not doing well at midterms, I will advise that student to consider withdrawing or getting tutors or whatnot to try to help them succeed. Okay, so you're really contributing a lot to the educational process. Okay, questions, comments on this? Okay. All right, so this is why grading occurs. So let's think about now characteristics of good grading. So what are some adjectives that you might be able to describe for good grading? You've all had grades, and go ahead.
Consistency.
Okay, so let's start putting some of those down here. Consistency. Okay, so I will grade all my exams such that unless the student is perfect, they get 0 on a problem. I grade 0 or 100% on a problem. That's consistent.
Grading also has to be fair.
So let's put that as a separate category. So do we have the distinction between consistency and fairness? How would you describe that? Well, how would you try to define those terms?
Consistency is doing it the same for everyone. Fairness is being an accurate reflection of how they actually did on the, or how well they were able to answer the questions.
Okay. So everyone agree with that? So consistency, the same quality and quantity of work should receive the same grade, no matter who the student is. Fairness is a reflection of how much of the learning outcome anticipated from the assignment or the lab report or the exam has been demonstrated. Okay? So I think consistency and fairness are two prevailing themes and trends that one should build in to thinking about how to grade. What are some good strategies for consistency?
Having a rubric.
Put some of that down there. So a detailed rubric, I'll say. Okay, so a detailed rubric, where does this come from? I think in many cases, the faculty member overseeing the course will provide that sort of rubric and say what she or he is trying to accomplish by the assignment. And try to tell you how important are numerical answers versus concepts. That this concept is important, it should be in there. If this concept's not in there, it's not so important, don't take off so much. This is the whole idea of partial credit. So the faculty member, I think, is primarily responsible for developing the rubric to be used. How many of you are in courses where the faculty is providing a rubric? How many are not? Okay, so for you who are not, what do you do? Okay, and so suppose that so how do you still award partial credit based on that?
So each question has its own ladder number of points that it equals up to, and if they have enough work to support that they were going through like the correct thought process, we're allowed to award as many points given.
So your instructor gives you flexibility to use your judgment to award credit in alignment with the answer key. Okay, so that's certainly legitimate. I think, anyone else have something different than that? Sir?
Okay. So, well, I know the course that I'm TAing, TAs are expected to generate the quizzes themselves.
Okay.
So one thing is I could meet with the fellow TAs and we could grade all the quizzes together so that at least among the TAs we're being consistent with what we're grading.
Okay, so conversation amongst the TAs. So one of the things that I always encourage when I use undergraduate TAs is that in the classes I tend to teach, the enrollment is such that I can ask one TA to grade all of one problem. Okay, and if one TA grades all of one problem, the second TA grades all of the second problem, I can ask the individual who grading that problem, just be internally consistent with how you did that grading. But if multiple TAs are sharing the grading for one problem, then we need a detailed rubric or some kind of conversation or communication between the TAs to make sure that all the points are being awarded consistently. Okay? But I think eventually it reflects back to the instructor. You should get your cues from the instructor on how she or he wants to handle the grading and what's important. Is it numerical detail? Is it numerical accuracy? Is it conceptual? Is it some certain principles? That's what gets built into consistency. Okay? One of the other tips that I give my TAs for grading, for consistency, is when you first pick up a paper and you read the first answer, don't mark the score. Read a second and a third and maybe a fourth or fifth. So you get a whole idea of the possible spectrum of answers to know how students are going to be doing on that. Okay? And so once you have some sort of gauge, you read a handful of assignments and a handful of problems to know how the range of how students are going to start answering this, then you can perhaps start to detail that with numerical scores. Okay? So again, that's maybe a tip that you'd find useful. Don't start putting numbers down right away. Read a few assignments, go back. Okay? Again, that's all for consistency purposes. Please.
Even if you're not splitting up by question, you could grade just the first question yourself and then move on to the second one, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly, yes, right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so consistency with a rubric, and again, is or grade all of one problem, all of one item. And again, another tip is to read several before assigning grades. Okay? Fairness, again, that's going to go back to the instructor. The instructor will give you some keys to what he or she believes is important in the fairness category. Besides consistency and fairness, what are other characteristics of good grading that you've experienced?
Feedback written on the exam or assignment.
So good feedback. Okay, and what constitutes good feedback? What constitutes bad feedback? You've all had, I'm sure, assignments returned to you that you thought the grading was terrible.
It's just marked wrong, but not explaining why it's wrong. It's next.
That together as
Okay.
they were just a number, but no.
Just a number, just an X, no explanation. So what goes into good grading?
Underlining the parts of the answer that let them get credit.
Okay. So showing where they went wrong, where they went right, yeah, and also where they went wrong.
Making sure it's clear what you got.
Be clear so that the student getting the assignment graded back will understand why.
If it's like too long to write out the explanation, like citing like what page number or like what lecture you could get the information from.
Okay. Yep. Exactly.
I've seen sometimes they'll even just like write out how to do the problem on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Or how you're supposed to.
That's a lot of work. Yeah. To write out their answer on the side. Other thoughts, suggestions?
Like not writing minus signs, but rather like numbers out of a certain.
Mm-hmm. You can be clear on what the feedback is. So I'm hearing all this. I'm going to write this down. I'm going to write it this way. That your comments, if I can spell properly today. The comment should teach the student. You are an extension of the professor. The comments that you give back to the student, think of what is going to teach them, what they did wrong, how to do it right, what's important, what's consistent with what the intention of the assignment was going to be. Okay, so you are teaching. This is part of the teaching role. The T in UTA is teaching. Okay? You're not to criticize students. You're to be in a helper role. Does that make sense? So as you're giving these comments and feedbacks, think, is this, no snarky comments, those don't usually teach, right? How many of you have gotten snarky comments on? Only him? Only you? Okay. I saw some other hands too. Okay? So consistency, fairness, good feedback to the students. What else is important for good, high-quality teaching?
Expediency.
I'm going to put that, I'm going to write it up here. Expediency or timeliness. I think there's always pressure. It's always beneficial to get the feedback and the assignment graded as quickly as possible back to the student to keep things on pace.
Like diligency, like if you're grading like 20 quizzes, then the way you grade the 20th quiz should be the same as you grade the first quiz.
Yeah, I think that's part of consistency also. It's being consistent one after the other all the way to the very end.
Transparency.
Okay. That can be, is that a new category? I'm going to put that under good feedback.
And it could go with like rubric, like sharing your rubric.
Yeah.
And how you grade it, so people can understand.
Yeah, that's good. It cuts across. That's right. What other characteristics of good grading are there? Anyone else think of something?
Like maybe being available in person to go over
And so it's not only the transmittal of written comments back and forth, but perhaps be available for discussion. Or further teaching. I think that's good. Anything else? It's a pretty good list here, I think. Okay, so I hope I've impressed upon you that you are helping the university, you are teaching, you are helping the students move forward in learning. Okay, I'm going to see if I can do a couple of. How much time do I have, Matthew? 10-15 minutes. Okay. Good, okay, thank you, good. All right, so, zoom back here. All right, so I have a couple of real live examples of some quizzes at CWRU and some real live examples of answers. So let's see if I can have a brief conversation about some of these. So this is from an intro biology course. Exam question. Give a real-life example of adaptation in a physiological system. For example, we discussed in class that we adapt to the sensory signal from receptors in the skin, otherwise we would feel our clothing all the time. That's the question. So student number 1, real CWRU student, gives this answer. Okay, so I'm going to follow the practice I said. Let's read a few more before we try to give a number to that. How do we know if that's a good answer or a bad answer? What's our gut? Is it a good answer? Okay, let's try the next one then. Okay, so student number 2. So again, the prompt is, give a real-life example. And here's the student's answer. Not a good answer either?
No.
Student number 3. Is that a good answer?
Yes.
You're all very consistent. So let's see. So if I scan back here, if I can get all of them on there at once, tell me why student 3 you like the best. Why did you all say it?
Well, for student 1, it's basically just coming up with a specific type of clothing because I would consider shoes to be clothing, and it's still talking about feeling. For student 2, it doesn't actually answer the question, and student 3 answers the question.
So I've been at shoe stores that don't sell clothing. I've been at clothing stores that sell shoes. But you're making a judgment that shoes and clothing are similar enough that that's probably not full credit?
Well, I think that the issue with that is that it's the same physiological response, and so they said specifically not to use that example.
Okay.
So I think that's why that would disqualify that answer.
Okay. Other comments on student number 1?
The explanation's also kind of unclear that they could have added a more description to it.
So it's not very clear? What's wrong with number 2?
They basically don't skew.
They didn't answer the question. Is anything what number student 2 said incorrect? No?
It's also 3 times as long as it needs to be, so you're just wasting your time.
3 times as long as it needs to be? Okay. Baffle them with quantity rather than quality, maybe? Okay. So if this was 10 points, how many people think student 3 should get all 10 points? Anybody think less than 10?
I mean, they didn't give a very good explanation on why it happens.
Did you ask for it?
Didn't ask for it. So it just said example.
Okay.
So, okay. So I think I would give probably full credit for this one as well. So how many would give student 1 5 or more points? Okay, not quite half. How many would say 3 or more? That's probably, so most people I think would be like 3 or 4. Why?
Because it is a real life example that is marginally distinct from regular clothes.
Yeah.
So it's very similar, but maybe different enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
So some partial credit, again, communication amongst the graders and the faculty member, and ask, how does this seem? Again, I think that's the key for good consistency. How about number 2? How many 5 or more points? Oh, you're a tough crowd. You would? Yeah? Let's try to get how many 3 or more? Ooh. How many 0? Okay. Tough crowd. All right. All right. Again, something to have a conversation before you start grading to figure that out. Okay. So let's do one more example. This one will be coming from engineering, and we'll see. So this is, I think, an intro control class. So here's the prompt. State what a feedback system is. State what is a feedback system. Give an example of a feedback system, and plot a block diagram based on your example. Okay. So CWRU student number 1 gives that answer. Can't give 0 yet. We don't know. It's the worst answer possible. But let's read a few.
Objectively the worst answer possible to give them 0?
No.
Okay.
I would give 0. Okay. Student number 2. Let me see if I can blow it up a little bit so you can read all the fine stuff. How do we know? No. So it's a signal loop back to in the control system with itself. Room temperature is an example. And then the block diagram is there. Let me remind you of the prompt. Plot a block diagram based on your example. Is that a block diagram based on room temperature control? Or is it a generic? It's very generic. Real CWRU student number 3. I'm going to fit it back on. So which one's the best? Does 3 deserve 10 points?
No.
I heard some no's. Why not no? Why no?
Because it's not terribly clear what each like part of the diagram corresponds to. Like I don't know what E is, I don't know what U is, I don't know what Y is. It's just overall not terribly clear.
I would give the full 10 points for that because it did exactly what the question asked. He did draw what is it, a feedback loop, and some of these things like E and U, like you don't need to go into each and every little part and say, okay, like for example, E might be like an error, U might be something else.
He's the error, yeah. I don't think I know the answer to that. Here was the prompt. It says, give an example, plot a block diagram. It's plotted. I don't know how much detail is the instructor wants. Yeah.
I think you should maybe go back to your like class notes, and in the class notes it directly says that like E, U, and Y are all labeled. Then it would be less than 10, but if they're not labeled in the class notes.
How's that sound? What's been common in the class? What is being used in the homework assignments in the textbook? E might be E is always the error between the set point and the actual output. We don't know that. Communication, which is now gone, but that's very important. Okay? So I think this has been a good discussion, and I think I've taken more than my extra 10 minutes. So I'm going to turn it back over to Matthew. So thank you.
So the last part of our time together today is to answer any generic questions that you might have still. If I can get this to go. Excellent. So we've talked a little bit about some academic integrity issues. We've talked a little bit about some maybe social issues that might come up as a result of your role as TA. What other questions might you have that our panelists, while we're all still here in the room, might be able to answer for you? I think a lot of what comes up over the year will just be kind of a recognition, and we talk about this with faculty a lot when we work with them on teaching ideas, teaching strategies, is the first and foremost to remember that we as faculty are people working with you as students who are people. And it's that kind of people-to-people relationship that matters first and foremost. And we see that a lot in educational research when students are asked what was one of the most meaningful things about your time in college. Relationships come up more often than not. And a lot of those times the relationships are either peer relationships or they're relationships with faculty or faculty mentors. And the same can be said of what you're getting ready to do in your role as TA. Again, Dr. Feek mentioned that you are kind of a conduit of the university. You're another branch of the faculty member. But treating people in your classes, treating the other students in your classes like people first and foremost, giving them the benefit of the doubt, maintaining open lines of communication can go a long way in kind of solving problems even before they come up. What are some things that you have, though, in terms of questions that maybe we didn't get to? Yes?
What happens if you lose an assignment?
What happens if you lose an assignment? You cry, and then I think that for me, it's you're honest. You go back to the student and say, hopefully, if it's something that was digitally produced on a Word document, then they can just give you that Word document again and say, here it is again. But there's no way to hide that. You lost it. Faculty do that from time to time, I would imagine. Other ideas? How many of you have assignments that have been lost by faculty? What have you done? Cried. And then email the faculty. Yeah, so there's a lot of crying involved in that process.
Can we turn the question around? How can you avoid losing an assignment?
Envelopes is one. Say again. As soon as you get it, do the work.
If it's a class where it's possible, scan everything.
Digitize everything and find a place to kind of keep that somewhere. If it's possible to keep a team drive or a drive share with a faculty member so that both of you can kind of keep track of things, that's also a way to kind of keep things in one space. And since that's our university platform, that makes it easier.
Count how many students were there for the assignment, for the exam. Count how many papers you're leaving the room with. When you take them from one place to another, count that you still have the same number of papers. It will be easier to find the lost paper if you discover it quickly, because you can then go and retrace your steps from a short amount of time, because you knew how many you had to start with, and your short one now might be easier to find it. So there are ways to try to reduce the likelihood of this problem and save on tears.
That's a good question. Another one? Yep.
What do you do in an assignment without a name?
Assignment without a name. Yes?
Do you just grade it and then tell the faculty member that the main, I don't remember what the name.
The person teaching the class.
Person teaching the class. Just tell them, hey, I graded this, it doesn't have a name. Can you ask your students to hold it?
If you are assigned as a grader, then that would be a good idea, right? Because you're already doing that. It's already something that you've been assigned to do, and then it's up to the faculty to kind of provide guidance on that. But again, expediency can be helpful there. If that was something that was handed in as homework at the end of the class and you realize very quickly as people are still putting their stuff away and getting ready to leave that you found one without a name, then, hey, I've got one without a name on it. If that even rings a bell that might have been you, please see me after class before you leave. The other way is if you're going through and you have a class roster or you're working with a team of TAs who are going through assignments that you're kind of checking off the list as you go, and that's another way, process of elimination. This is the person that we don't have listed on there. It might be theirs. Dr. P.
So my experience is that I use Canvas for my courses. I'm often getting the student looking in Canvas and seeing no grade, emailing me and saying, I think I might have forgotten to put my name on it. So it often happens that the student will come to me before the TA will.
Other questions? You all are just going to be the most prepared group of TAs ever. Just going to get this. You have resources available to you, though, right? So as today is not the day that you're going to think of everything that may come up, and situations will, oh, hang on just a second. Exit cues. Exit cues already. You won't have all the answers or even all the questions to ask today. And there's not a time when you're going to be out there by yourself, or you shouldn't feel like you're out there by yourself in whatever role that you are as a TA. If you're on a team with other TAs, then you've got those people to talk to. If you look around the room and you see other peers or other colleagues or friends that are in here, then just like we've done today in small pods, you can ask questions of them and bounce ideas off of them. If you've got questions about academic integrity or something that you feel belongs with the dean's office, then you've got Dean Wolkowitz's office. If you've got questions about teaching pedagogy, then you could speak to us in USITE, or you could talk to Dr. Guy there as well, because she handles a lot of things with the graduate TA training, and she would be also helpful within USITE. Your faculty are reliable people to ask those questions of, which is why it's so important to keep those communication lines open. Anything else? Yes.
What if a situation arises where you bring some sort of concern to the professor, and then you feel like the professor handles it inappropriately? Who do we contact then?
I'm gonna go back to Dean Wolkowitz on that, because I have an answer for myself and my department. What would you say?
I would say you can go to the department chair or the academic rep for the department. Or I would say you can come to one of us, and we'll help you sort through and figure out where to get the information to.
In our department, there's kind of a clear delineation of that. So we know that there's undergraduate coordinators for people that they can speak to. There's also the department chair that they can go to. So there's kind of a structure built in, and we go over with our majors what that is as well, so that everybody's kind of aware of the process.
And I believe in the manual that was posted, at the end it points out that Dr. Garrett, Dr. Geither are available at USITE, and I and Dean DiUlio are available in undergraduate studies should some issues arise related to your role as a TA throughout the semester. But most of the questions will be answered by your faculty.